What is going on, Movie Meals? Movie Meals podcast time. Lot to talk about. We're going to quickly, because we just never got really a chance to sit down and record. We're going to talk very quickly and review John Wick Volume 4 as well as Dungeons and Dragons that Kyle and I both got a chance to see. We should have Air reviews up as well as a Super Mario Brothers review up soon as well. But most of this episode is going to be about Star Wars Celebration because that's what's important in life. um, I'm going to next year's. As long as it's in the States, if they move it back in the States, I've made up my mind I'm going. Just like this year, I made up my mind to go a couple big events I've never been to. Next year, I'm going to Star Wars Celebration. I've made up my mind. So thank you, Moomba patrons, Kimberly, Karen. Go join the merch. Links down in the description or merch. Go get some merch, join the patronage, all that stuff. The podcast is exclusive on Patreon. First, you'll get it a week later on YouTube. But let's get into it here. So let's quickly, Kyle, throw your positives and negatives, everything into one, because I want to get to Star Wars. What were your thoughts about John Wick Chapter 4?
It's a blast all the way through. I think what just impresses me the most, witnessing the growth of director Chad Stahelski, I believe that's how you pronounce it,
Mm-hmm.
Stahelski. Witnessing his growth as an action director over the years. Not that he, started off poorly and then became as great as he has been, but he already had a great start with John Wick, and then he just has been able to elevate his craft not only with the creativity of action, but just in thinking of different ways to utilize the action to move the story forward, while also having the story and the characters move the story forward as well. It's a really great balance between the two, and I think his visual style is terrific to watch. It's some of the best that I've seen, just because not only is it just pretty to look at, but again, it's just the creativity of how to show the story. Because this, I think, for John Wick, we it's not exactly the most wordy of scripts per se, but I would say that this one is especially the case. But the fact that visual creativity was able to push the story forward as much as it did, combined by excellent performances by Keanu Reeves, obviously, but also with the additions of like Donnie Yen, Bill Skarsgård, you could just tell that Chad has been able to get his get his props from these great actors to where they were all in on just adding such great talent. I mean, Halle Berry was in the last movie. They just are great with getting people on board with just a terrific action movie. So yeah, I just am really happy by what this franchise has been able to go through and deliver when it comes to action. And I just think each time these movies keep setting a new very, very high standard with action movies, and that certainly is going to be the case with John Wick 4, because I bet there's going to be a lot of action movies until I see otherwise, where I just kind of shrug and go, yeah, but it's not John Wick 4. So it was a terrific theater experience. I loved every second of it. You don't feel the runtime. Just terrific fun all the way around.
I disagree about the runtime. You feel the runtime.
Oh,
I
okay.
love every second of it, but we got out of the movie. I saw it twice in 3 days, and I heard people as we're walking out, man, that movie was a little long. Like, that was a little long. That movie's a little long. And if you're not into the action from start to finish, I completely understand that. I loved John Wick 4. I watched all 4 John Wicks within about 72 hours.
Yeah, same.
And you're talking about all these actors. Willem Dafoe's in the first one. I mean, they've been getting
Yeah.
these insane actors for a while. So I think it's not that Chad has really grown as an action director. I think he has just grown as a director. I think the biggest thing I noticed from watching 1 and then all the way to 3 and 4 specifically is he is letting the camera tell part of the story. He's not feeding you everything. Are the action scenes incredible? Do they get bigger? Absolutely. But he really has started to develop just being a strong director. He's letting the camera be more fluid and tell a joke or tell part of the action or something like this. He's blended his scores more. He's gotten better at with his editing and final decisions on that. I think he has just improved very much to be going from this guy's a really good action director to following his partner's footsteps, who went on to do Deadpool and Bullet Train and all these other movies where they are both becoming just strong directors in their own right, not just action directors. And I think John Wick 4 is an absolute blast. I love the addition of Donnie Yen. There's a point where Bill Skarsgård, I was like, oh, that's Pennywise. I'm a little scared. That's Pennywise right now. And there's like a close
Huh.
up on his face, and I'm like, okay, there. Yep, I think the eye is moving a little bit. Yep, there's Pennywise. So he was great in the movie. All the actors are phenomenal. I loved the story. Uh, it's just this franchise is just the best. It's the closest thing we have in the West to the Raid. Obviously, the guys in the Raid are in the second one, but I like when in terms of action, it has stepped up a level. I think for the West, which has been really cool to see other movies attempt to follow it. With mainly these two guys leading it, I think of the best action movies that have this style of action, and I'm thinking Atomic Blonde. Oh wait, didn't one of those guys do Atomic Blonde? Exactly. So I hope these guys continue. I hope it's a trend other directors start to do. I'd love to see one of these guys go on and take on a Star Wars project because I think their action in Star Wars would be phenomenal. Um, but anyway, yeah, I love John Wick 4. If you like the John Wick series, please go check it out. Moving on to Dungeons and Dragons. Kyle, what did you think of it?
It was a good time. I liked it. And I think because the movie was able to have a certain charming wittiness to it, to where it didn't feel like it was trying to be like too over the top ridiculous, but also wasn't trying to be too serious about what it was at the same time. And just not as someone who knows anything about Dungeons and Dragons, but we've had friends, Alex, you and I, who have played the games, and just from outside looking in, it seems like that's kind of the case. Okay, I guess I mean maybe you've played it once, easy. Uh, but
Played it more than once.
with Dungeons and Dragons, it seems like that's kind of also part of the fun of it is that you're not supposed to take it seriously, otherwise you're playing it wrong. So it seems like with the directors, I think they also wrote the movie, Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly. It seemed like they had a really good understanding of like the point of the game, so they really tried to infuse that lightheartedness into the movie, which I appreciated. It didn't, and I also like that it spent time on characters to an extent, particularly with Chris Pine's character, who anytime Chris Pine plays a more aloof character, I'm always on board, and that's just what's the case here. So I was totally down with it, and I thought him and Michelle Rodriguez's characters, they weren't the most in-depth characters, but it was enough to where you were able to get on board with them and want to see them uh be able to avenge for the story that is going through. So I thought the cast was a hodgepodge of bunch of people like I wouldn't imagine being put together, but it worked. They just were able to be on board with the story that they were given, and that was part of the witty charm of it as well. So I don't know, just a fun. It was a fun romp, I guess is the best way to describe it. It knew what it was enough, but it still took itself seriously enough to where you kind of got the best of both worlds, where you were interested in the characters, but you also weren't worried about world building or the stakes of the magical land that they're in or whatever. You were focused on the characters and what the characters were going through, and it had enough charm to win you over with those characters along the way. So that's what I liked about it. It was just good fun.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with the movie. I thought the action looked great, the CGI looked great. I've played Dungeons and Dragons maybe half a dozen times, 6 or 7 times. I've loved playing it every time. It's just not something I feel I can commit to because it is a commitment. And I've been
Yeah.
lucky to have really good DMs every time because I barely understand half of what I'm doing, even though I'm playing it a handful of times. But I've had great DMs who have done more beginner styles with me, and I loved it. I remember being like, wow, this is just storytelling. Like I feel like I'm in a play right now or something. And I know a
Yeah.
lot of the actors talked about that. Chris Pine in an interview said like I played the game to get ready for the role, and I was like, this is acting. Like I'm having a lot of fun. So yeah, I really liked it. I think the what you were describing is exactly what I remember feeling playing it. I know more people take it very seriously, some don't, but it felt like that's what it is. It's a lot of humor because you're doing these wacky and crazy things with all these side quests that you might want to go on, and it has all these kind of goofy moments and yet moments of serious. So I thought they did a great job balancing it. I had a lot of fun in the theater watching it. You're right with Chris Pine. I thought all the actors were phenomenal. Chris Pine really is always great in these kind of goofy roles. He's really just great in anything he does. How Chris Pine
Mhm.
has never won an Academy Award is beyond me. However, none of these
Hell or High
Chris's,
Water.
come on, they're all great. I know Hell or High Water, he should have been nominated, but uh, yeah, I had a blast with it. I think it's a fun little action movie that I'll probably return to here and there. And yeah, all right, you ready for Star Wars?
Oh, I'm always ready for Star Wars, Al. When am I never ready or excited to talk about Star Wars?
Okay, I'm gonna warn you right now. If you bring up the dark saber one time, I'm just hanging up the call on you. I'm kicking you
Well,
off.
we better not talk about Mandalorians or
Oh, we've got Mando stuff to talk about. So Star Wars Celebration was yesterday from when we're filming this. We're filming this on the Saturday after. Um
mhm.
and I keep telling myself you should take Star Wars Celebration off. Take a personal day, watch all the live streams, have a good time. And I keep freaking forgetting. Or not being able to, but there was a lot that happened. They kind of, the first big things that I noticed was obviously the Ahsoka trailer, which we reacted to, and the Indy trailer. Indy, yes, it's Star Wars Celebration, but they wanted, because it's Lucasfilm, to get the trailer out. So they dropped another piece of news, and I think they did that because they knew they didn't have more movie things, and so they dropped it. Those reactions are on the channel. Like they didn't have movie footage. They don't have any of that, so I think they went ahead and did that for a reason. Um, those aside, if you want to see us talk about Ahsoka more, you can go check that out. But I've got a list from IGN that did a great job kind of summing up everything that had happened with the big announcements. So I'm just going to kind of run through the ones that I think matter, like who's playing Grand Admiral Thrawn. They announced who that was. I think that makes sense. It's Lars Mikkelsen. He voiced him on Rebels. He's a phenomenal actor. It made a lot of sense. But it would have been a little surprised if it wasn't him. Um,
Real quick, was that like not known? For some reason I thought maybe I'm thinking of it as like a rumor or something, but I thought that was already confirmed for some reason.
it was not
That Lars
confirmed. No, it was a rumor.
hmm,
Uh,
rumor. Okay. Yeah,
yes, but
probably
no,
good
it
then.
was not confirmed until Celebration.
Gotcha. Okay.
But everybody kind of knew it was happening, so I don't think it's a spoiler by any doubt. By
Oh,
any sense of
okay.
the term. Let's see here. Um, Star Wars.
Yeah. Probably not
I
too much
want
of
to
a
get.
spoiler just because casual audiences probably haven't seen Rebels, so they don't know that he's voiced him before. So, yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah,
But it's
I'm
still
gonna
cool.
skip some of the big stuff. I'm gonna focus on more of the smaller things that were talked about first. We'll get into the big stuff. Like Kathy Kennedy said, Rogue Squadron and Lando, the Lando show, are still happening. Lando is definitely still happening, is what she said, and Rogue Squadron could still happen. I
Mm,
watched the interview with IGN where she talked about this, and I found it wildly interesting. Um, I also watched the IGN interview with John and Dave, which I also found very interesting for some of the kind of small things I was reading in between the lines on. But she said Rogue Squadron is something they had talked about for a long time, that this is not just a random idea, that this is something they had truly been thinking about, and that they would still like to make it happen. And that schedules, in this interview, she's talked about how scheduling has really been the biggest thing that has halted a lot of these movies. That like Patty Jenkins, she wanted to continue, or some of these others. I think mainly when she says schedules, I think she's really talking about Ryan Johnson. I think she absolutely is planning to do Ryan Johnson's trilogy, and I think they are just waiting for him to want to come back and do it. Um,
really?
yeah, they
I
literally
just
talk about it positively every time it's mentioned.
I don't know. I mean, sure they could look like that, but I just feel like they're so skittish still after Last Jedi. I mean, then again, it's been years. Everyone should get over it by now, but I don't know. It just seems like a rumor mill type thing. Like they're just trying to save face, but it's not going to happen.
But
But
it was reported in the
hey,
trades.
yeah,
I'm
that
just making
she
fun of you.
that she wants to do it, but
Well, even
I don't
Ryan
know.
Johnson, when he was promoting the newest Knives Out, was asked about it, and he said, "Oh, I have ideas. We are still very much moving forward with it. I just want to do these Knives Out movies first." I think everything you said is true. I think they wanted to wait for time. I think Ryan wanted to go off and do something different, and it may not happen. But I don't think it's one of these ones where it's, we're bringing in, JD to come to a Star Wars movie. He pitched this insane idea. Oh wait, no, we don't like it anymore. We're not doing it. I think he is a very different relationship. Patty was like, no, creative differences. We're not getting this done. Maybe she comes back, maybe she doesn't. But I do think Ryan, it really is, I'll do it when I'm ready. And they're like, sweet. I think that's really as far as it goes. I don't think there's much more to it. I don't think there's this huge surrounding drama where Disney is like, we don't want Ryan Johnson to do a trilogy. I think they know that they would want him to do one. Um,
Okay.
but Mando was had some interesting stuff. Rick Fumiyawa, I hope I'm saying that right, who's one of the producers, he's directed episodes. He confirmed that Din Djarin, our main Mando, is not the main character going into season 3. That now Mandalorian, when the show is called The Mandalorian, it's about Mandalorians. And that makes a lot of sense when you look at what Dave Filoni and some of the other people have been saying too. It sounds like it's all going to accumulate into a big movie. And we'll get into that. I do think they did show the next episode coming out this week at Star Wars Celebration. And
Mm.
yes, you have to take it with a grain of salt because everybody's there hyped up on Star Wars Kool-Aid. But everyone
Yeah.
was like, wow, I've been very disappointed in this season. And this episode was the best by far. So I'm really curious to see what it will be. But I thought that was a little bit interesting and makes sense. We can't keep going with Mando and Grogu for too much longer. I think it makes sense for the show to end, or it needs a time jump if we're going to stick with just those two. We need to have more, either switch up the direction with the plot, which it seems like they're trying to do, whether they're doing it well or not. But yeah, any thoughts on any of that, or you want me to keep moving?
Uh, well, I think at this point, given how the show is progressing, we kind of got the gist that this is more about Mandalorians, plural, than just the Mandalorian. But that kind of bums me out because I've liked seeing Jin grow to not only a father figure, but kind of understanding how to be a more well-rounded person, how to almost be more of a friend to and an ally to people in the way. Just because I think at least with like the history of Mandalorians and his kind specifically, I like that it was background story to help us understand who he was as a character, as a person. But through like Rebels and Clone Wars and this show, I just have never really liked Mandalorian stuff personally. It just maybe I'm just too casual of a fan, but it just gets too dramatic and complicated for my taste personally, and I'm just feeling the same way within this series. I kind of had that realization this past episode, in fact. Um, so I'm not really looking forward to that. I'd much rather, like you were kind of suggesting, Alex, to maybe do a time jump in a way to where we see the relationship of Grogu and Jin grow more. That would have been more interesting to me. But I think since they did the reuniting of those two around the Boba Fett show and not for Mandalorian, that it really caused the show to kind of lose its way in a direction that I personally am not really enjoying.
And
Um,
we'll touch on
so
that
yeah,
here too in a moment. We'll circle
cool.
back to that. Another little piece I wanted to touch on is that Mary Elizabeth Winston, who is in Ahsoka, they finally revealed who she's playing, and she is playing Hera, which I think is really cool. She's a phenomenal
From
actress, and
Rebels.
playing Hera Syndulla is a great role. Excuse me, is a wonderful role for her to take on. We got a brief moment of Ezra Bridger in the trailer, which was really cool. I didn't really catch the first time. He's on a little hologram. There's a quick shot of a hologram, and I didn't realize it was Ezra
Oh,
until later. But so I want to touch on this other piece of Kathy Kennedy news before we then touch on the movies, which I think is the biggest thing here. Or they
for
did,
sure.
real quick too, before I forget, they did show the footage of the Acolyte privately. They didn't release it. I've seen people show leaks. I didn't watch them. I quickly scroll away because I feel I want to wait till it's a finished product that they want everybody to see. But apparently it looked really, really great. The Acolyte taking place during the High Republic era. Um, so I'm excited for that. The Acolyte is being described as Frozen meets Kill Bill, and I think that is very interesting because that's what everybody keeps saying. Uh, but anyway, So Kathy Kennedy in the IGN interview I watched did say was asked about Kevin Feige's movie. There was no mention of Taika Waititi's at all. But she did mention that she was asked point blank about Kevin Feige's movie for Star Wars, and she said that is something. And I'm going to butcher the quote a little bit because it was in a video, and I can't pull the video back up and get it word for word. But she said something along the lines of how that kind of came out of media. She said, "I don't want to say fandom, but kind of just fandom." And here's what I think is interesting because I texted that to Kyle, and then Kyle pointed out that he's like, well, it was in the trades, it's in Variety, it's in Hollywood Reporter. It was coming from very reputable scoop people.
Mm.
And what I think is really interesting is one, scoop people can get it wrong. They have in the past, they will in the future. They can get it wrong. But
Yep.
what she said is, and this is where I think it's interesting, is she said, Kevin has never approached me with an idea. He's never approached me to do that. I know he's a huge Star Wars fan. We all know he's a huge Star Wars fan, and I would love to talk with him if he has an idea. But he's never approached me with an idea. I don't, I, funny enough, believe Kathy Kennedy because it makes no sense for her to lie in that situation. Because if Kevin had approached her for a movie and she's lying, I don't understand why she would feel the need to lie. If Kevin has approached her with an idea for a movie and was going to produce a movie, and I know I can tell Kyle's ravagingly looking up the original article for it. I could tell by his demeanor, which
I'm
I would hope.
so curious. Like, the
But
first article I see says Kevin Feige Star Wars film has been shelved. Like, what are we talking about? You go, you
so
go.
but here's what I'm coming from here. I actually believe that this was something that was incorrectly reported. A scooper had a somebody who, when he released it, was incorrect. I think is just what happened because I don't see why Kathy would lie. Because if the movie is shelved, let's say she is lying and the movie is shelved, why does she need to lie? That I don't understand. Why lie? If the movie shelved, say Kevin had a great idea, he's been spread too thin, which has been reports from Marvel. Marvel has wanted to kind of secure him back, so his movie's been put on the back burner. We've shelved it. Boom, there you go. There's no reason to say, well, we've never actually really talked about it. I'd love to. And to be honest, I believe her because I think Kathy has been under such fire that every interview I watched with her yesterday felt like she was like, I'm going to be genuine. I'm going to tell everybody straight up what has happened from my mouth because she has been coy. And I think it's really interesting because I believe her. I had to go back and rewatch the question being asked and her response because I wanted to really watch it again. And I believed her. I don't see, it doesn't even make sense for her to lie. So I think it was a false report. I don't think Kevin Feige was ever actually making a movie. And did it come out of fandom? Abso-freaking-lutely it came out of fandom. I would 100% believe that. People have been talking about how Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers should do a movie since The Winter Soldier. So, what are your thoughts?
Well,
Well,
according to the Hollywood Reporter on September 25th, 2019, the headline says Marvel's Kevin Feige developing new movie for Disney. There is a beginning of a paragraph here as I'm skimming through it saying Feige had discussed a foray into the Star Wars universe in a late summer meeting with Kennedy and studio co-chairman Alan Horn and Alan Bergman. Now look, maybe it didn't wind up being that he is developing a movie. Maybe the headline's a bit clickbaity and he just was like,
it
hey,
absolutely
maybe
sounds
here's
like
some
it, baby.
suggestions for Star Wars, but I'm not pitching a movie. I guess that could be something I buy. I could buy that. Um, but I also just have learned over the years that you kind of have to take almost everything in Hollywood coming out of Hollywood with a grain of salt just cuz there's so much movement on so many projects and ideas and people hear different things that you just never know exactly like what is going on. So it could be possible that words got mixed up. That's for sure. But I also think with the amount of movies that Kennedy and Star Wars have announced and then go, "Oh, just kidding, not happening," that I'm not exactly surprised that she would be like, "Oh, that never happened." No, no, Kevin Feige never pitched anything because she doesn't want they don't want more scrutiny for that. So, I could just see that's the reason why they're pulling this. And it might also help Marvel fans be more at ease of like, "Oh, Feige is not getting stretched too thin. He's going to be focusing on Star Wars, or Star Wars, focusing on Marvel a lot better moving forward." So there could be stuff at play to that where I could see that going on behind the scenes. But mainly me, I just always am skeptical, especially with Star Wars nowadays, on like what exactly is true and not true. So that's just all the thoughts that I have. I'm not as fully on board with thinking she's being truthful as you are, I guess.
I insanely disagree that she would lie to save face. I don't think she cares anymore. How do you've been dragged through the mud since 2019 or 2017? How you're now suddenly going to be like, let's save face, let's just lie, and you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me at this point. I'm skimming through the article here too. I pulled it up, and to be honest, this just sounds like Kevin and Kathy and Alan Horn were all sitting at lunch, and Kevin was like, because they talk later about how knowledgeable sources say that he had an actor in mind if they ever make a movie. And it sounds like maybe he was like, dude, Chris Evans in Star Wars, Kathy, Chris Evans in Star Wars, like saying something like that. And Kathy's like, man, they're all drinking champagne. Wouldn't that be great? That sounds awesome. And Alan Horn's like, you guys should seriously do that. I love money. And they're like, wow, that's really cool or whatever. And then Alan Horn goes in an interview and he's like, I don't know, they sounded pretty great. Like, they're really talking about it. And then Kathy's like, we joked that Chris Evans should be in a movie. Like, is she saving face? Maybe. But I just don't see any reason why she would about this. Kevin
I think
Feige's
she's
movie wasn't
helping.
going to fix Star Wars. He was going to make, if this is true, and he was going to make a
Yeah,
movie that was shelved, he was going to make one movie. He wasn't going to retcon everything. That's another thing.
maybe.
I have seen video after video after video since yesterday of how Star Wars Celebration was horrendous by the toxic fans you and I talked about yesterday, because they were like, The Mandalorian is clearly setting up a tease that they are going to retcon the entire sequel trilogy, and they're going to redo it with Dave Filoni and Kevin Feige taking over and Jon Favreau. Why is that not happening? I hate Star Wars now. And it's like, are you an idiot? Pay attention. Like, there's one thing to read in between the lines. Kyle and I are doing that. It brings fun discussion. It brings all this fun stuff, and it brings fun theorizing, which is fun. But
Mhm.
they were never going to retcon the sequel trilogy, you dummy. Are they going to try to tinker in there a little bit here and there to maybe make a few things make sense that didn't get made, that didn't make sense in Rise of Skywalker? Sure. That sounds great. It's not retconning, it's retooling. God, people are stupid. Anyway, I thought that was just an interesting discussion
For sure.
about about Kathy. I really don't see a reason why she would lie. I want to hear Kevin talk about it. Maybe Kevin comes out and he's like, "Nah, man, we got drunk. We were having a good time. I thought Chris Evans. He's like Rocket Raccoon would make a heck of a Jedi. Team him up with
Well, ain't
Yoda."
that the truth? To be
Um,
clear, I'm referring to trying to save face to the brand, not necessarily for her. She has her money. She doesn't care. She'll be a
the brand
producer
of
somewhere
Star
else if
Wars
she
doesn't need to
leaves
be
Star
safe
Wars.
based. It's been
Well,
divided since the 70s and the
since the
80s.
70s.
Oh, there are news articles. You can find them if you Google it. There are news articles that talk of reviews from old newspaper clippings about how people hated Return or Empire Strikes Back because it didn't make
Oh, I've heard
sense.
about that. Yeah.
Anyway, all right, let's get to the kind of the next big thing here, and that's the announcement of 3 movies and that Disney is doing eras. So they put up this big graphic. I have it here in front of me, and it's got different
Yeah.
symbols. And
Explain
it
this to me.
starts at the Old Republic, then the High Republic, Fall of the Jedi, which it would be around the prequels, Reign of the Empire, episodes 4 through 6, Age of the Rebellion, I guess that would be episode 6. I guess these are episodes 4, 5, and 6. Um, but then the New Republic and the Rise of the First Order. The New Republic is taking place where Mando is now after Return of the Jedi, and the fall of Rise of the First Order would take place through episode 7 and 9. Um,
Okay, so sorry, because I'm a simpleton with this stuff. So Rise of the First Order is supposed to represent episodes 7 through 9.
I
correct?
believe so, yeah.
New Republic is TV show stuff that we're getting currently?
I don't think it's necessarily meant to fit in that specific brand that all TV shows are in there, but yes, currently Boba Fett, Mando, like because the Acolyte will not be taking place in the New Republic era, but
Right, and
Mando is, Boba Fett did, and Ahsoka is correct, but the
gotcha,
Acolyte
so,
is
like
not. I believe Skeleton Crew is also the New Republic. It's between episode 6 and episode 7 when the First Order is trying to scrounge together before they get full power. Because in the beginning of episode 7, the First Order is controlling the galaxy again. So, I mean,
okay,
they go ahead.
so where would the first 2 trilogies be on this timeline, just so that way I can get, like, a very simple idea and I'm not
So
lost
the
here?
Fall of the Jedi makes sense. That's episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
I would, and then Reign of the Empire, imagine is uh, 4 and 5, maybe, and then Age of the Rebellion would probably be 5 and 6. I believe they would all be around that timeline. So
Okay,
yes.
sounds good then.
So
Okay,
Fall of the
continue, thank
Jedi
you.
through Age of the Rebellion would be your prequels and your episodes 1 through 6. Nothing has
Okay,
come out in the Old Republic or the High Republic other than books for the High Republic. And then
gotcha, the
Acolyte will
EU
take
stuff.
place in what?
The EU stuff, extended, um
No, it's canon.
oh, okay, never mind then,
Yeah,
cool.
no, when Disney bought Lucasfilm, everything except the Clone Wars TV show, the movies, the Clone Wars movie was EU. Everything except that became EU. Everything after that, Rebels, every book, every comic, everything is canon. They reset it. They
Okay,
did that
that's
back in
right,
like
yeah.
2014. Um,
Yep, I remember that now.
some and they're moving a lot of people over, so they bring this big graphic up, and there's all these characters out, and I've watched a couple critics and pundits and just Star Wars geeks that I like to follow who were there, uh, who talked about how they thought the show was over, and Kathy then says, and I watched the live stream, and Kathy says, I know you all wanted to hear about the movies, would you like to hear about it? The fans go nuts, and she
No!
says, we do have movies that are happening, and she brings out 3 directors. She brings out James Mangold, which was a surprise,
Yep,
which was a big surprise. Um, she brings out another thing that I haven't heard a word about anything about this Damon Lindelof stuff. I know he left, and there's supposed to be new people working on that writer's room. Didn't get a mention about this writer's room, which I think is interesting. But Damon Lindelof comes out, or James Mangold, excuse me, comes out. They bring out Dave Filoni, and then they bring out Shireen, who is somebody we had heard had been tapped to do a Star Wars project to
that's the
do this.
Lindelof one. Yeah,
Yes, to do this project. I just didn't hear anything about that writer's room.
right. No
Um,
mention of Stephen Knight then?
Not that I've heard. I may have
Gotcha.
maybe didn't hear it yet. I didn't watch the full panel with them because they were also kind of more of the, like we're gonna talk about this. We're I didn't finish the whole thing, but it was more like for the celebration. Here's what we're doing. It's gonna be about this. Yay. You know what I mean? Not here's the writers
Gotcha.
working on it, and it wasn't the details, but
They gave
so
the log line of each movie. Right.
yes. So James Mangold, this is the one I want to touch on last. It is
Okay.
going director of Logan, incredible movie. Indiana Jones, which looks great. Really hope it sticks the landing because if it doesn't, watch Kathy fire him. But he is going
Mhm.
to work in this new era called the Dawn of the Jedi. Is I've heard has been corrected as part of this Old Republic era. That it is not the title of his movie. It might be, I don't know, but I've heard people say it could very much just refer to this. It's supposed to take place following the first ever Jedi. He in an interview said, how did the Force come to be? Who was the first to discover the Force? All this stuff. Um, and I have an interesting thought on that because where
Yeah.
Kyle's going to gripe, I also have some reservations with. But
Mhm.
then they announced Dave Filoni. He's going to focus on the New Republic in between 6 and 7, and It sounds like, along with Jon Favreau as a main producer, Jon Favreau is working on it with him very much. I've seen some pushback that Dave Filoni's never directed a live action movie,
movie.
so this is
Yep.
a huge jump. I think there is and isn't some truth to that. We'll get there. I want to get through these three projects, but and then Shareem is they bring out Daisy Ridley, who just a few weeks ago, a week or two ago, was promoting that she is looking for employment. She had to have known she was coming back long before she was saying that in interviews. But they brought her back, and that Charmine, I keep pronouncing her wrong. Her movie will take place 15 years after The Rise of Skywalker, which is actually going to put Rey 2 years older than what Daisy Ridley would be now. So when they start filming, she'll be the appropriate age as well. And that she's going to rebuild the Jedi Order, and she's going to have a temple, and it's going to focus on that. And I think this is all insanely interesting. Um, I will. I think let's start with Dave Filoni. So Dave Filoni's movie, in their IGN interview, it sounds like, and then I heard more rumors of this, and people kept saying it who were there. They were like, man, they really made it sound like what they're trying to do is do the Avengers.
Yep.
And it sounds like the plan is for the movie not necessarily to be the ending of these shows, but that a lot of characters who you have met throughout shows will cross over into this movie. I have a feeling the movie will be some sort of giant battle for Mandalore, is my guess, with Ahsoka being the lead, or an Ahsoka style movie with everybody else with her. I do think when we talk about the characters on the show, I think most of them will be Ahsoka. From Ahsoka, I think it'll be our Rebels crew, and then maybe Mando comes with, maybe some kids from the Skeleton Crew or something like that. But right now, I have some reservations. Kyle, what are your thoughts?
That not everything needs to be Marvel. I think that sounds incredibly boring, personally. But I'm not surprised that this is probably if you have Dave Filoni doing a Star Wars movie, I'm not surprised that could be the direction that it's going in. Because already in these shows, they feel like they're trying to do crossover stuff and cross promotion type stuff. And look, like obviously that's still popular, kind of, is crossover universe building type things like Marvel. And I'm sure, like, if this movie does happen, it will make its money easily. I don't doubt that. I just think from a story perspective, that sounds very boring. And I also think, for as popular as Star Wars is, I just don't think all audiences are catching up on the shows and knowing what's going on and how everything connects as much as maybe Marvel has done. So I get the idea from a business standpoint. Just as someone who enjoys Star Wars as much as they do, I just find it very um lame to say the least.
I think
So yeah.
I think it really will depend on how the shows end up. I mean, if Ahsoka and them and they do a good job of kind of leading it up to this big moment, then I think yeah, that would make sense. I don't think casual audiences it matters. So Star Wars is the brand. Marvel needed that back in the day. They don't need it anymore. Marvel's the brand. You go see
Yep.
something because it's got the Marvel logo on it. So I don't think that matters as much anymore. And people are clamoring for Star Wars movies. So I'm interested in it. I want to see what that first trailer would look like and see how the lead up works. I do think it is very on brand for John and Dave. They've ever since Mando season one, we like pretending we're playing with our toys in the sandbox. And when
Mhm.
you have all your toys, you're going to have crossovers. So that makes sense. It's on brand. It's never not been advertised. Um, it makes sense. It really will just kind of depend on where the direction of the story is going to go. If the end of Ahsoka they're leading up to this idea that Thrawn is going to do this insane thing to rebuild the Empire before Snoke eventually does it or whatever, and or the Emperor cloned and does it. Um, I think if they bring it up to this insane thing, it's like, oh my gosh, like I can't wait to see this on the big screen. Like it's just gonna, I think, depend on how the rest of these shows go. Um, but yeah, I'm excited for Dave. I do think the idea that Dave Filoni's never done a live action thing is a bit unfair, or like that he's never done a movie. I saw a critic that I really like tweet at it, and I actually tweeted back at him and asked if he thought the same about the Russo brothers. And he was like, "Well, the Russo brothers had directed movies; they had made like one or two comedies." But here's my point. Okay, when Miguel Sapochnik from Game of Thrones was rumored to be doing a Star Wars movie, and the idea from fans were, oh, the guy who made Battle of the Bastards is going to make a movie. He's never done a movie before, but everybody was on board with that idea. And it's because Game of Thrones per episode was a movie, it was a massive production. And Mandalorian has passed Game of Thrones in terms of its budget. And it has a huge production value. And you can see that, especially I think when you're watching Mando in space and you're watching a lot of that stuff. It feels like a movie on my TV. So I think there is some fair truth to that, that it is a bigger project, it's bigger, but I also think he has been working for the last handful of years on Mando and Boba Fett and Ahsoka, and he has gotten some experience on these massive sets. To him, it's probably more of, well, now I'm just directing every episode instead of directing two episodes in the season, if that makes sense. So I think there's some truth, and I think we need to be a little bit more fair to Dave. And he talks how he has really learned a lot, and he's going to have Jon Favreau with him the whole freaking way, who started the MCU, who made the Jungle Book, who's made a Chef, a phenomenal movie, who's made a lot of great movies. So I think we need to not be too hard on that with Dave, but that's just my thought. Do you have anything else on Dave, or can we move on to the other movie here?
Just two things. One, in regards to what you're saying, I also think it's a little hypocritical because the other director, I'm spacing on her name now. I believe she's only worked in television as well. She might have done some documentary work, but I don't think
She's
she's done
done a lot of
movie.
documentary work. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. Maybe documentary work. She has had more skills in movies as compared to Dave Filoni, who's done animation and live action television. So maybe it's not as hypocritical now that I'm thinking about it out loud. But I just think you could make the same argument for both of them, and I do think it's a fair question as well to be like, hey, like you do want someone, even if they've only done like low budget movies, to have movie experience. So
Yeah,
I understand to an extent.
I agree with you. I think
Mhm,
too that when you look at like the Russo brothers, I do think it's a very different production making two small comedies from the mid
comedies.
2000s to making a Star Wars movie that is using new VR technology as it's set. There's a huge gap there. So
Big
I
time.
think it is a fair question. I'm agree with you there, but I also think it's a little unfair at times to say they can't do it. But
Uh,
anyway.
the the second thing that I did want to bring up, as I was kind of thinking about in the back of my mind, is that I'm also not surprised that Disney is going to make a movie centered around the shows because I think Disney, in a way, is kind of one of the last distributors who, movie distributors who are begrudgingly realizing that the theatrical experience hypes up your movies, hypes up your products a lot more than they realized, as much as they really wanted to go direct to consumer with streaming over the past few years. So I think this is their way of being like, well, fine, we'll release a movie, but it's going to be about our shows. And then everyone's still going to have to go watch our shows on streaming.
I think that's a lot of
But
Bob Iger coming in,
y- yeah,
realizing that.
I think
Yeah.
that's exactly the case. But I think a lot of studios are realizing too. They're realizing that movies get their promotion, their advertising on theaters, and then you can make lots of money, and then you still get good promotion on streaming, and people will go to your streaming service to check out those movies. So I think that's also part of the strategy of why they're doing this, which is why I'm not surprised that they are going down this route. So I just wanted to mention that last part, but that's all I have for this one. Want to move on to the next movie?
And thank you, Top Gun Maverick, who showed us people actually will go to the movie theater. It doesn't matter if you make a great thing with a cool trailer and an awesome movie. There you go. Um,
No.
the other one, we'll talk about Shireen's. I love Daisy Ridley coming back as Rey. I think giving her story more works. I do want them to break away from the Skywalkers, whether she says she's a Skywalker or not. I still, she's not. Um,
Uh.
I know. She just uses the title. And I actually, the thing that excites me the most is that this is a woman making a Star Wars movie. It
Okay.
is Charmine. I keep saying it incorrectly and I really do apologize, but she excites me the most. She's a woman. She's a woman of color. She hasn't had giant big budget movie experience. And I like that. I hope that she comes up. I could see her writing like an insanely great or directing an insanely great scene where Rey is explaining to a youngling about how the Jedi, that she's not a Skywalker, but she wants to keep the name alive and keep the idea of what Luke and Anakin were. I mean, Anakin's the chosen one. If you disagree with that, I'm not sure you watch Star Wars. So I think it's wonderful that she's doing this. I do hope John Boyega comes back. He has been more open recently to coming back than he used to say. I would love, and I know a lot of fans have been saying they would love for him to come back and actually have him as a Jedi and wielding a lightsaber. I would love for him to be a Jedi. I am okay if he's not. I just wish they would have handled his character better than JJ repeating what everybody didn't like in The Last Jedi about his character. And if you're wrong, you didn't watch the movies because it's just plain to see that he fell in love with a girl and tried to be the hero and rode space horses. It's the exact same thing he did in both movies, and I think that was unfair. And I just would really just like to see him get a fair shake. I'd love for him to be a Jedi. If he's not a Jedi, that's fine. I just want to see him get another opportunity. I'm happy with Rey getting another opportunity, and I think building the Jedi Order could be a really interesting task. I hope we don't dive too far into the well of the past outside of just maybe Rey and Finn getting another story. But yeah, what do you think?
Out of all the movies, this one I'm actually the most pleasantly curious about. I kind of like the idea of a Star Wars movie that gets us back around to focusing on multiple Jedi. And I hope if this movie comes to fruition, which is something that I think we're going to be saying for a long time with these three projects, but if this movie does come to fruition, that's not a story about like, oh, we're trying to build up Jedis. Oh, and something happened and now there's only one of us left again. Let's not do that. Let's do an interesting Jedi story and have multiple Jedis and stick with it. Let's see what happens with that growth. And hopefully it can be something different to where the Jedi act differently and are better peacekeepers than I say that they were in like the prequel trilogy and the Clone Wars. At least for me personally, that's how I've perceived it. But yeah, we've had our problems with Rise of Skywalker, obviously, but never in that movie and the other two movies do I have an issue with Daisy Ridley as Rey. I think that
No,
she did
it's
do a
awesome.
very good job. She was a character that I enjoyed watching. I just think there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff that caused the character to not have the best conclusion in that arc. So I
AJ.
do I I do like
Sorry.
the idea of continuing on with her, and she seems like she's willing to come back. I'm sure the money's really good too,
Well,
but it
she is
does seem
coming
like
back.
she's yeah, it does seem like she's willing to come back, and I think that's really cool that she wants another shot at this, and I'll be curious to see how that goes. In terms of the timeline, I don't really care if they say specifically like 15 years from Rise of Skywalker, because in Star Wars, we don't know like the exact times of things or like years or anything like that. So,
Well, they did. They
I
said 15 years.
well, yeah, but like when you watch Star Wars, like they don't tell you like in the year 2109 or like
Yeah, they do.
15 when? Really?
It's all
Am I missing
BBY.
something?
Come on. Come on.
BB White, what are you saying right now? What
I said that once to Nick. BBY is Battle Before Yavin. So they base everything based off of the Yavin 4 battle, which is the battle at the end of A New Hope. So you're a certain
okay,
amount of
like
years
that's not a number.
before or after. Yeah, but well, that so I don't remember the exact numbers. I don't have a great
What?
memory, but like Return of the Jedi, I believe in one of their text crawls, Return of the Jedi or Empire, they say so many years since the Battle of Yavin. It's that's a big point. So yeah, they do
But
it.
that's
They
such
just
I'm just saying, like, that's loose terminology for, like, timetable stuff. Like, I'm just saying, like, if you're being specific and giving a number to something, I don't really care. If you say, like, many years from Rise of Skywalker or whatever, like, fine. That's cool. Like, I'm just here to watch a Star Wars movie. I'm here to watch Jedi battles. Like, I'm the casual audience where I'm like, get me back into Star Wars. Don't care where it's at. I just want to be in this world and have a good time. That's all I'm saying. Like, I don't care if it's like 15-year type thing. That doesn't matter to me. And no casual audience knows about BBY, XYZ, whatever you wore, just
Well, yeah, not the
said.
casual folk. Well,
I'm talking
duh.
from the casual standpoint about that.
Well,
We
I
don't
think
care
there's an
about the
argument to
number.
be made. You're not a casual Star Wars fan. I think you know a little bit more than the casuals.
I don't
I
know
was talking to
about
Autumn about everything that happened in Celebration yesterday, and she was like, "I think I need to rewatch these movies. I don't remember like any of this."
same
So
autumn.
stop. You've been a fan of the Dark Saber since 1992.
Oh, you don't bait me.
So
Don't you do
we
it.
we're running out of time, but I do. This is the big one. But James
Yeah,
Mangold is creating a movie around the dawn of the Jedi. He referred to it as a biblical epic. He wants Ten Commandments meets I think it was Ben Hur or something like that,
Frozen?
or
Oh, okay.
one of those other movies, and talking about the first ever Jedi and all these things. So um, I know Kyle, you're going to touch on how you you don't you don't want them to reveal the mystery. I agree with you.
Yeah,
And I was sitting thinking about this, and here's what I thought about. Okay.
okay.
I'm going to compare Star Wars to maybe the greatest television show of all time yet again. And that is Avatar The Last Airbender. And
Mm,
when I think of Avatar and I think of Korra, and I think Korra is very inferior to Avatar, I think it's okay at best and sometimes touches on being really good. But in Korra, spoilers for Avatar and Korra, they touch on the very first bender ever. It's
yeah,
okay. It's not
yeah.
great. It,
Yep.
it to me, it's one of the best parts of Korra, but that's because I really don't like a lot of the rest of Korra, and I thought it was okay. But I didn't want to hear that. But what Avatar does so well is they also touch on it, but they touch on it better. It's Toph saying, well, the first ever airbenders in history that we had heard of were the Badger Moles. And I happened to get lost and found some of them who were also blind, and I studied their technique. And Aang's like, oh, that's what we did with the bison and how they studied dragons. And I think th- that's that's the way you explain this. You have to go Avatar, not Korra. It can't be some Jedi being like, I found the one real midi-chlorian at the center of the galaxy and I released the energy to the world. It can't be that. It has to be like some old Jedi who has always felt a weird connection and he learns through nature. That's what it has to be. That's how you tell that story because that is telling the story of the first Jedi without making it stupid, with keeping the mystery alive. So as soon as I realized that, I was like, that's how you do it. That's the comparison yet again. Don't mess up this time. And the thing that helps is Dave Filoni made a bunch of Avatar Last Airbender, and he needs to start going around and he needs to be talking about it more, and he needs to have a conversation with James Mangold about it. But anyway, what do you real quick? What are your thoughts about his movie and my comparison?
I'll start off with James Mangold. That dude makes good movies. Like, if you go through his filmography, like, he
True.
almost has touched nearly every genre, and he puts together, like, at worst, good, you know? At best, great, obviously. I mean, look at the likes of Logan. But, so to hear him, want to do a Star Wars movie, or possibly is going to do a Star Wars movie, yeah, I want great talent attached to these movies. So sign me up. I am on board with him doing a project. Now, Alex is correct. I'm not a fan of hearing that, oh, we're going to explore who the first Jedi was and how they discovered the Force and what it is and what does it mean and for me, Star Wars, again, I feel like the casual in me has liked Star Wars because I liked that it doesn't explain everything. It just takes you into the world and it just is. And granted, I know prequels does explain like midichlorian stuff, yada yada. No one likes that anyway, and I know that's been done before. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of the point, though. We didn't like that because the mystique of Star Wars is one of the fun parts of it. Like, we don't need to be explained. Like, you can theorize of like what does it mean to be like on the good side or the bad side, or is there like a middle ground? Is there that gray Jedi ground that may or may not be canon? I don't know at this point, but I'm just saying, like, it's fun to speculate about that stuff, but we don't need answers explained in Star Wars. But Alex, your pitch, I like.
Because I'm
I
a
like it.
genius. Can I,
And
before you finish,
I
can
okay,
I toss
go
something in
ahead.
real quick?
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to point this out. Midi chlorians is Korra explanation. That's why it
Yeah.
sticks. Go ahead.
Um, and as much as I'm more of a fan of Korra than you are, I will agree I did not like that episode of Korra. Because when I get introduced to Avatar, I didn't need it explained. I just like being in there. So
Just goofing around.
I liked the comparison because that was kind of what was going on in the back of my mind when I was like, oh, we're gonna go down that route. So, but if it is just a story of the first Jedi, and maybe it's just starting to see how they begin training other Jedi or how they find other Jedi, okay, that could work. I could be on board with that, but I don't want everything explained to me.
I
That's all that
agree.
I need to say about that.
No, I
It's fun
agree.
because of what it is.
It needs to be handled with what the original source material comes from, right? So that's why I think Korra doesn't work when it does that. It feels like when Aang meets the turtle, it's like, oh, it's like in Clone Wars, which is makes sense. Again, Dave Filoni. It's like in Clone Wars when they meet the Ben, or not in Clone Wars, in Rebels when he meets Bendu, an ancient
Yeah.
being who can tap into the Force, who is not light or dark, who understands the Force and understands where it comes from, but doesn't blatantly be like, well, there was one midi-chlorian set in the middle of the universe that exploded. And that's what they need to do. It needs to be a Jedi. If you're going to show me how this Jedi is the first one to ever learn the Force, he needs to learn it through nature, through Bendu, through these space whales. It's got to be through the animals. It's got to be through nature because that is what the Force is.
Okay.
That's what George came up with the first time, and he struggled the second time. But that's what I think. Now, James Mangold did make the Wolverine. He has made a bad movie. Okay.
It's fine.
But
Ending
he has
doesn't
made
work. It's fine.
quite a bit of really, really good things. I forgot about Ford v Ferrari, which is phenomenal.
Oh,
Um,
Oscar nominated.
Yeah. Uh, but anyway, that's our thoughts on Star Wars as we're wrapping up here. Curious what you guys think. I'm glad I got Kyle on my side on how you make mystery work. That's what you do. Now it's time to go rewatch all of Avatar and go have a good freaking time. But guys, what did you think of everything? Comment below, let us know. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, thanks for watching, Mom.
See you guys.